Who they think they better than? Ain't no comparison to the so-called black or African American. You can drop the African, keep the American. When we say Aborigine and make their world in, I'm going in the same dirt my ancestors buried in. I come from a god and a goddess, so what that make me? Not even Basquiat can trace me. Not even Van Gogh can paint me. The MC in me is the God MC, equals the God in me. I'm focused in, let my mind be free. You too blind to see. The Jews I give is real, it's been real. These ain't shots, they missiles. All you gonna hear is the whistle. Lyrically, this an execution. My verses start revolutions from my people seeking restitution. Since the beginning, fuck evolution. Or maybe my reality is all a dream. I put it together like I was sewing seams. So it seems this is that audio dopamine. Go against the regime, we put you where nobody can hear you scream. And sing you to meet your Elohim. My nigga, this is savage mode. It's something that you can't decode. It started with a spark and I'ma let it explode. I was given the cheat codes that'll let me dump and reload and go through them waves like a fucking torpedo. You dealt the cards of life, I just cut them diamonds with the ace of spades. Y'all scatter like roaches when they facing raid, or vampires when they facing blade. I'm trying to get next to Shireen like I'm getting played. You still stuck as a mental slave. You still stuck in that mental cage. While I'm making easy money, pipping holes in style. This my coming to age. Crowd roaring when I'm coming on stage. And when I'm done, they gonna be cheering my name. Drake Cobbs, and nah, I ain't quit my day job. I spit bars. I really rap on my day off. That's real shit. Just give you some tools you can build with. Aim high even if you still miss. Just keep going. It's a climb to the top. And I'ma keep flowing. Down Lake Shore, I'm Chicagoan. Yeah. You niggas is playing checkers, we playing chess. And nigga, this is checkmate. Dre be the big dog and you just a little bait. You out of Africa and we ain't got the same traits. I'm a God being and we ain't got the same fate. My granny died February 18th and I was born on the same date. The chosen one, the ancestors' chosen son. They gave me the golden gun. One shot, that's a hole in one. From the pyramid of the sun to Poverty Point. I don't think you niggas is getting the point. We still here. Who said they made the Aboriginals disappear? Your information's lagging in the rear. All you do is teach fear. We copper-colored with woolly hair. Am I speaking clear? So fuck the nonsense. When I rap, I touch your consciousness. From within is where you get your self-confidence. Let's bring it back to dominance. Ain't no confining us. Gonna bring that wild Indian out of us. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. We still here.
Welcome to the Cherise the Realist Show.
Peace and love to all the Aboriginal, Indigenous, Indians. Grand rising to everyone. Yeah, so you guys see the title and what time it is. I was trying to decide if I was just going to go straight into the video, like from where I wanted to start, and then just keep pushing from there. I think that white slavery is obviously a topic that I know a lot of our people in the community have covered a lot. You know, I think it's been a while since we've really covered it. So, there are some things I just want to go back over, and, that we really think about when it comes down to the narrative of slavery and who it impacts to turn the narrative on the other people, right? To make it seem like it was us and not them, to make it seem like, we were just these inferior people in history, when in fact, people were living a history that was one of the same. So just give me a second. I want to play another video, a little quick song, and then we can, well, first I'll do this. Oh, hold on. Shout out to my chat, everybody that's pumping on through. I'm not going to be very long with you guys today. I stubbed my toe and it's hurting so bad. So I hope I didn't like fracture it or anything. So I got to go get that checked out. But so that's why I'm not going to hold y'all long, because I got to go handle that and go to urgent care and, see what's going on. But yeah, shout out to the chat. Hey, Darvis. Hey, Owlette. Thank you for coming to the party. What's up, Juice? Of course, Big Dog Philly OG. My mans, Michael Akamak Hurst. Peace and love to you, baby. Be holding it down. What's up, the enemies public? Hey, guys. Dang, Darvis, this can't be your first time in my chat, Darvis. But anyway, let me play one more song, and then I'm going to get these videos up on queue for y'all, like a couple of readings that I want to do just briefly, so we can start to try to put things together and we can start trying to make some things make sense. Hey, the enemies public. Yes. Hey, y'all. Nate Aboriginal Bad, y'all. Israelite. Hey. I hope y'all can hear me loud and clear. All right, y'all. So bear with me. Thank you guys so much, like I said, for stopping through. And, I'm not going to hesitate for too much longer. But I do want to play one more song and then support the community. And I should have everything like queued up. I have a bunch of things queued up, but I want to make sure I have the right thing up that I want in the orders queued up right. Y'all feel me? And peace and love to everybody. Thank you all so much once again.
And oh yeah, put that Super 7 in the air. Tell me how you feel it when you're feeling up there. When you in the sky breathing rarefied air. When you're breathing rarefied air, oh yeah. Put that Super 7 in the air. Tell me how you feeling when you feel it up there. When you in the sky breathing rarefied air. When you're breathing rarefied air, just that job theft, that chow mein, that pepper bull, that towel main, since sunset in the arc of Wayne, my brain moving like Tao saying, so ass above, it's so below, that up and that down thing, this flow is atmospheric, I call that a ground game, see water is knowledge, so if I'm teaching, you're learning, so how your God make a sun without vortexing and current, see the pattern is panic, I'm reaching out for my people, oh watch me flow through your speakers, you feel the force of the ether, and when the force hits the equal, I'm taking off like an eagle. Police popped the pastor yesterday for pushing political. My DNA is Moshe. Mix that thing with higher water. My spirit rate is OTN. It's just a higher order. Got more light than Kavita. Rap a lot just like Tila. Went from sinner to saint. Shout out my big homie Sealer. Got more torque than a sports car. Got more work than a door star. And the 4 million I make, I'm giving the Dr. Umar. Oh yeah. Put that Super 7 in the air. Tell me how you feeling when you're feeling up there. When you in the sky breathing rarefied air. When you're breathing rarefied air, oh yeah. Put that Super 7 in the air. Tell me how you feeling when you feel it up there. When you in the sky breathing rarefied air. When you're breathing rarefied air, oh yeah. Super 7 in my rites and ceremonies. I'm married to Jehovah, holy matrimony. Confucius say, in the words of Caillou, Before you hit the tomb, be a bridegroom. Only got one question for Miss Susan B. On how to last Ahu is now a Angui. Blame my inspiration, I'm just thinking thoughts. But in the way of God's, we gon' keep it short. Why Jesus wanna kill me, Matthew 10:34. Just a couple questions that I'm needing to know. Oh, watch me flow, it's so potent. Set the vortex in motion. Super 7, I'm floating across the Aegean Ocean. Oh, you a Muslim now, so I guess you make it feel like. Well, I'm an Israelite, I'ma make him at the Shabbat. Got Moses on the bumper, super slap off in my spaceship photosphere. So I stay lit, peace and light to the faithless. Oh yeah. Put that super 7 in the air. Tell me how you feeling when you feeling up there. When you in the sky breathing rarefied air. When you breathing rarefied air, oh yeah. Put that super 7 in the air. Tell me how you feeling when you feel it up there. When you in the sky breathing rarefied air. When you breathing rarefied air, oh yeah.
Say I'm hustling and I'm grinding. I'm making moves with my money on my mind, and I can't fall short. No, always keep it 1,000. Slow mo. Say I'm hustling and I'm grinding. I'm making moves with my money on my mind, and I can't fall short. No, always keep it 1,000. Slow mo.
Okay, y'all. Peace and love. Peace and love. I hope y'all could see that real good. Shout out to my sister Bad Saint. Who else popped through? What's up, Rain Alexander? Clay Gray. Yep. Peace, y'all. All right. I'm going to just do this brief little read and a couple of little brief readings. I feel like my daggone heat being on is distracting me a little bit, but I'm going to keep it cute. All right, so white slavery in America. Michael A. Hoffman II, a researcher of history of white slavery, has exposed slavery of whites in America. Up to 1/2 of all the arrivals in American colonies were white slaves, and they were America's first slaves. These whites were slaves for life, long before blacks ever were. This slavery was even hereditary. White children born to white slaves were enslaved too. Whites were auctioned on the block with children, sold and separated from their parents and wives, sold and separated from their husbands. Free black property owners strutted the streets of northern and southern American cities, while white slaves were worked to death in the sugar mills of Barbados and Jamaica and the plantations of Virginia. The establishment has created this misnomer of, quote, indentured servitude to explain away and minimize the fact of white slavery. But bound whites in early America called themselves slaves. 9/10 of the white slavery in America was conducted without indentures of any kind, but according to the so-called custom of the country, as it was known, which was lifetime slavery, administered by the white slave merchants themselves. In George Sandy's law for Virginia, whites were enslaved, quote, forever, end quote. The service of whites bound to Berkeley's 100 was deemed, quote, perpetual. studied 17th century colonial America, sifting the documents, the jargon, and the statutes on both sides of the Atlantic, and one will discover that white slavery was a far more extensive operation than black enslavement. It is when we come to the 18th century that one begins to encounter more quote unquote servitude on the basis of a contract of indenture. But even in that period, there was kidnapping of Anglo-Saxons into slavery as well as convict slavery. Ships carrying white slaves to America often lost half their slaves to death. According to historian Sharon V. Salinger, quote, scattered data reveals that the mortality for white servants at certain times equaled that for black slaves in the quote middle passage, and during other periods actually exceeded the death rate for black slaves. Salinger reports a death rate of 10 to 20% over the entire 18th century for black slaves on board ships en route to America, compared with a death rate of 25% for white slaves en route to America. In the founding era of the colonial America, in the founding era of colonial America, both white and black slaves were referred to as quote unquote servants. Once the term slavery came into universal usage, a word derived from the enslavement of Slavic peoples, objective observers of the time who were without mercenary ties to the traffic in white servants called them slaves. Contemporary observers described it as white slavery and referred to indentured servants as white slaves. A letter by white slave Elizabeth Spriggs in Maryland to her father John Spriggs in London, England, September 22nd, 1756, describes some of the condition that these white slaves lived under. Honored father, oh dear father, I am sure you'll pity your distressed daughter. What we unfortunate English people suffer here is beyond the probability of you in England to conceive. Let it suffice that I am one of the unhappy number toiling day and night, and very often in the horse's druggery, with only comfort of hearing me called, you bitch, you did not do half enough. Then I am tied up and whipped to that degree that you's not serve an animal. I have scarce anything but Indian corn and salt to eat, and that even berguded. Nay, many Negroes are better used. After slaving after master's pleasure, what rest we can get is to wrap ourselves up in a blanket and lay upon the ground. This is the deplorable condition your poor Betty endures. Child. So what y'all think about that? Hold on. It's some more too. It's some more. So did y'all hear that? What they said, that white slavery was more notable, not notable, more predominant than black slavery ever was? That's a hellified claim to make, isn't it, family? Hold on, let me go back to that. Yes, he said up to one half of all arrivals in the American colonies were white slaves, and they were America's first slaves. These whites were slaves for life, long before blacks ever were. This slavery was even hereditary. White children are born, this slavery was even hereditary. White children born to white slaves were enslaved too. Child. Messy. See, and that's the problem now with all of these narratives and things that are going out about our history, who we are, what we've contributed to society, because they don't tell the truth. They don't tell the truth. All right. Because these are quick little reads, y'all. So this one is about white slaves, black slave owners in America. Hold up. Is this the one I wanted to read? Hold up. It is one I want to read, but it's one I want to read before that. Here we go. I thought this was interesting too. White slavery as a cause of the American Civil War. It is interesting to note that one of the causes of the American Civil War, also known perhaps more correctly as the war between the states, was the threat of slavery to the white working class in the north of the USA. Lawrence R. Tinzer and A.D. Powell have produced research into this little-known subject. Quote, the institution of slavery has existed in every one of the northern states throughout the colonial period, and such slavery was not limited to black slavery. White political prisoners and petty criminals from Britain were sold and brought to the colonies as slaves. During the 1850s, the South's plan to nationalize slavery was merely to reintroduce it in the North where it had previously existed just 50 to 75 years earlier. With so many whites part as slaves in the South to begin with, the idea of expanding slavery to include white laborers in the North moved slavery from a matter of color to a matter of class. Southern politicians frequently pointed out that the slavery in Greece and Rome was based on social status, not on color. They also called attention to the fact that the slavery in the Bible was not Negro slavery. So I don't know, some people might not link that one. Political materials for the presidential campaign of 1856 include references to the literal enslavement of white people and illustrate the extent to which the idea had developed. The famous Richmond Inquirer reference about slavery not depending on difference of complexion and the laws of the slave states justifying the holding of white men in bondage was cited along with this quote from a leading South Carolina newspaper. Slavery is the natural and normal condition of laboring man, whether white or black. All of the talk during the campaign of 1856 about the South enslaving Northern whites took on profound meaning after the Dred Scott decision allowed slavery into the territories. Another Dred Scott decision would allow slavery into the free states of the North. In either case, free white labor would have to compete with slave labor and could not survive because the average daily wage of little more than $1 would become 10 cents or 25 cents. White laborers who fell into poverty could be sold into slavery for debt. As the New Democratic Doctrine said, all the Northern white laborer requires is somebody to sell him when he falls into poverty. In his book, A Journey in the Backcountry, Frederick Law Olmsted asserted, nothing in fact, but the enslavement of labor at the North could in the nature of things give that security to the capitalists of labor at the South. In a footnote, Olmsted quoted the Richmond Inquirer. While it is far more obvious that Negroes should be slaves than whites, the principle of slavery itself is right and does not depend upon difference of complexion. A series of speeches and dialogues which included references to white slavery took place in the Senate and in the House of Representatives in 1860 and give a sense for what Northern members of Congress wanted to express on the eve of the Civil War. Congressman Henry Waldron of Michigan, Israel Washburn Jr. of Maine, William Wyndon of Minnesota, and Senator James R. Doolittle of Wisconsin, and Senator Charles Sumner and Henry Wilson of Massachusetts all mentioned George Fitzhugh by name. His quote from Sociology for the South pertaining to slavery, black or white, and the Richmond Inquirer quote about slavery not depending on difference of complexion were repeated time and time again, showing the concern Northern politicians had regarding the enslavement of white laborers. In 1859, Lincoln referred to Southern political power, trying to show that slavery existed in the Bible times by divine ordinance. Whenever you establish that slavery was right in the Bible, it will occur that the slavery was the slavery of the white man, of men without reference to color. Lincoln's own campaign newspaper, The Rail Splitter, spoke of white slavery in an article entitled "Capital Should Own Labor." Asked, whatever may be your opinion of Negro slavery, do you think white men should be slaves? Do you think white men should be made slaves? The same edition included this excerpt from a speech by Senator Benjamin F. Wade of Ohio. Capital should own labor, referring not merely to the labor of the colored man, but to that of the white man as well. A front page article reminded readers, it is not long since the Richmond Examiner, a leading Southern organ of the democracy, said that that natural condition of the laboring classes of whatever color was slavery. Many articles in Lincoln's paper discussed the insurmountable problem free labor would have in competing with slave labor, and the specter of white slavery was always present. When one truly understands that the politics of slavery had no regard for color, it becomes clear that free laborers in the North and others fought to abolish slavery, not out of altruism, but in order to ensure freedom for themselves and their loved ones. Slavery, black or white, answers a major question that has puzzled historians of the American Civil War as to why Northern whites would fight to free blacks they believed to be an inferior race. Slavery, black or white, also begs the question as to whether or not the Civil War would have occurred if the existence of white slaves had not brought home to Northern citizens the great danger that slavery posed to their free society. The authors do not claim that white slavery was the only cause of the Civil War, but it was certainly an important cause which has been overlooked in academic literature. So what I found interesting here was this last quote. When one truly understands that the politics of slavery had no regard for color, it becomes clear that free laborers in the North and others fought to abolish slavery, not out of altruism, but in order to ensure freedom for themselves and their loved ones. Slavery, black or white, answers a major question that has puzzled historians of American Civil War as to why Northern whites fight to free blacks. Why would Northern whites fight to free blacks they believed to be an inferior race? That's important. Slavery, black or white, also begs the question as to whether or not the Civil War would have occurred if the existence of white slaves had not brought home to Northern citizens the great danger that slavery posed to their free society. Yo, that's a great question. Why Northern whites would fight to free blacks they believed to be an inferior race? Why would they do such a thing? Why would they do such a thing, family? I'm still trying to understand. Okay. Do I want to do this one? All right, hold on. So before I do that, let's go here real quick, y'all.
They gave up their rights to their labor for several years. It was supposed to be, according to history, it's 4 or 5 years. In fact, it could be as many as 12. And what they didn't realize was that they were signing away all their rights and they had become chattels. They were used as property, regarded as property. Now, as we began to investigate this, and we used all the kind of resources that investigators do, we look at every kind of book, every kind of official report, etc., diaries, letters. We realized it was an enormous story. And it was also something which refuted one of the great ideas one of the key ideas of the development of slavery, which is that in 1619, slavery began in America with the arrival of 20 and odd Negroes, as they were called, sold, according to accounts, by a Dutch captain to planters in England, and this was where slavery began. Well, it wasn't true. Slavery had begun earlier.
Ooh, it wasn't true. Ooh, it wasn't true.
We look at every kind of book, every kind of official report, etc., diaries, letters. We realized it was an enormous story. And it was also something which unearthed a wider and wider story. We found it wasn't just women, it was children.
Needed women. And this seemed to be an astonishing thing. And so it went from there. And one looked at this and thought, well, this is just the tip of something. This is actually the edge of something here. And so the very fact that these women were taken out of the penal system in Britain, in England, and sent off to the new colonies with no say for themselves about whether or not they went or not. So the interesting thing was, what was it they were going into? What was it was already there that these people could just be taken out and shipped 3,000 miles away? And so we started to look at what this possibly could mean and what the wider context was of that. And that's how it began.
And we unearthed a wider and wider story. We found it wasn't just women.
So this came out, this was posted on YouTube about 11 years ago. And what they are doing is investigating slavery and the legitimacy of it. Now, you heard what he said. So y'all listen closely. Hold on, y'all. My grandma calling.
Shout out to the mama chief. Yeah, you be quiet when Big Mama speak. What she gave us is a part of me. It flows through my arteries. Even on that journey, that love grows how the garden be. The first to teach us when we sick, the first to heal us. Mama's boy, yeah, you know, her pride and joy. Soul food, yeah, you know, I'm an enjoy. Calm you down just by the sound of a voice. There isn't another feeling inside when they cheering you on at your game and you feeling the pride. You and your siblings fighting, she gon' make you put them feelings aside. She can't lead you down the road, but she can give you the guide. Where you think I get that blissful look in my eyes? I need a side of ice cream with Bim's apple pie. You know for sure for Mama Chief, you know I'ma ride. Cause we all need our Mama Chiefs. Yeah, we all love our Mama Chiefs. The greatness, the patience, the foundation, the knowledge passed down so many generations, our motivation. I just wanna thank you for my creation. Cause we all love our Mama Chiefs. Yeah, we all need our Mama Chiefs. Yeah, we all ride for Mama Chief. The dedication, I seen your tears at my graduation. Now look, Ma, your boy that made it. You the reason I'm one of the greatest. Yeah, cause we all need our Mama Chiefs. Yeah, we all love our Mama Chiefs. Yeah, we all ride for Mama Chief. Now be quiet, let Big Mama speak.
Say I'm hustling and I'm grinding. I'm making moves with my money on my mind, and I can't fall short. No, always go, keep it down, slow mo. Say I'm hustling and I'm grinding. I'm making moves with my money on my mind, and I can't fall short. No, always go, keep it down, slow mo.
Pan-African, fuck a Pan-African, fuck a Pan-African. Hey, them niggas trash like some ooh. Try to get back to them slave hoes. Hey. Try to get back to them slave hoes. Hey. Fucking slave narrative, they phony. I had this nigga named Toby and he owe me. When the plot crop and the stock drop on top, them niggas going. Sold to the bitter cotton pickers, them my niggas. I'ma come down, feed them chitlins and them gizzards. Nigga, I'm the mister, I whip ya, I kill you. In the big house, go down with your sister. Send it back to you, then I send for your mother. Y'all niggas look, I'ma work it like no other. Make you pick cotton till the sun come and touch you. Till your damn hands and feet.
I'm sorry, y'all. I'm coming.
Look me in my eyes, I'ma backhand the buck up. Nah. Shout out to Grandma Foo. White man came, she the one that sold you. My crew swam to the show and got you. Good shit, Jesus, man, that nigga came through. Hey, fuck a Pan-African, fuck a Pan-African, fuck a Pan-African, fuck a Pan-African. Hey, the niggas trash like some ooh. Tryna get back to them slave boats. Hey, tryna get back to them slave boats. Fuck off it, fuck Lennon, fuck Jeffries, ayy. Fuck off it, fuck Ben, fuck Jeffries, ayy. Fuck off it, fuck Lennon, fuck Jeffries, ayy. Ayy. Play with this shit, dude. Begin. Yo, so PC acrobatic. Fuck a Pan-African, fuck a Pan-African, fuck a Pan-African.
Sorry, y'all. Y'all know I had to speak to my queen, my grandma, for a second. You know, getting some things situated with my queen, my gangster granny. My bad, y'all. My bad. I know some of everybody left out. My bad. Come back.
With children.
But let's talk about this, because these two men are started to investigate white slavery. I didn't get their names. Oh yeah, Don Jewell and Mike Walsh.
Convicts, it was prisoners of war, it was all sorts. It was so people who signed up as indentured servants to get to America free of, they didn't have to pay the passage, the poor. They would be contracted, indentured by merchants and by captains and by planters' agents to go to America free, in return for which they gave up their rights to their labor for several years. It was supposed to be, according to history, it's 4 or 5 years. In fact, it could be as many as 12. And what they didn't realize was that they were signing away all their rights, and they had become chattels. They were used as property, regarded as property. Now, as we began to investigate this, and we used all the kind of resources that investigators do, we look at every kind of book, every kind of official report, etc., diaries, letters, we realized it was an enormous story. And it was also something which refuted one of the great ideas, one of the key ideas of the development of slavery, which is that in 1619 slavery began in America with the arrival of 20 and odd Negroes, as they were called, sold, according to accounts, by a Dutch captain to planters in England. And this was where slavery began. Well, it wasn't true. Slavery had begun earlier. Children and women and convicts have been sold earlier than that. And although a small number of Africans were subsequently brought to Virginia and sold over the next decades, only very few, only 350 years later. 20 years later. But meantime, hundreds, thousands of poor whites were being brought in, and on various convicts and children, etc., and they were being enslaved. So that started us thinking this is an enormous story. It was a story.
So listen to what he said. In 1619, they said 20 in our Africans pulled up to be enslaved in the colonies or whatever, right? Then boom, 20 and odd, that's really a small number, like he said. These 20 and odd people supposed to be our ancestors. I'm the fuck confused here. So who was the real slaves? Let's talk about it because it's outrageous.
Story too big, in fact, to sell to television. There were so many aspects of it. We didn't know how to compact it, but we did think it was an important and terrific book.
Yeah. And then the question was, if we were right on what was going on, the question in your mind immediately is, as a journalist, is, well, why doesn't everybody know this already? Or have we just got the wrong end of the stick here? And that is, of course, everybody's fear. I mean, it's the fear if you're doing something contemporary, just as it is if you're doing something that's historical. That the famous kind of thing was that I remember when we worked in World in Action was there would be the person who would turn up with 3 briefcases full of documents. And your first thing in your mind was, is this person a crank? Or are they real? They've got a bee in their bonnet, they feel aggrieved, something terrible as far as they're concerned has happened in their lives. The question in your mind is, am I on the edge of a great story here, or is this another one of the astonishing numbers of cranks of the kind of a green and red ink brigade, yet again turning up with 1,000 documents to prove something which is totally and utterly mad and it's just a bee in their bonnet? So, of course, we were immediately worried about that as well. But we noticed certain patterns that, as we start to look at this, that appear. One of which was that when you looked at these early people who were sent out, like Mike just talked about, children were sent out, street children were rounded up and sent off. And when you read about the official versions as to why this was happening in the very early 17th century, the official versions were always that this was a great humanitarian thing, that they were taking these poor urchins off the street and sending them off to start a new life in these fabulous new colonies, where instead of having a dead-end life where they die on the streets of malnutrition and illness, they would be given a new chance. Well, if that were true, it suddenly occurred to us, we would surely know that, because that would be one of the greatest humanitarian things that's ever happened in the history of the world. So why was it that that's where it was painted up at the time, which it was? Even John Donne, the famous poet, who was the Dean of St. Paul's,
First of all, you gotta give it up to these brothers these white tea brothers for even having the courage to go up there and speak on this. Because this is the stuff that we are constantly being deprived of knowing. And if they realize that really the story of slavery is about them, you know what I'm saying? Maybe they'll start acting a little differently. Because 20 in our Negroes, the math ain't mathing. Like we always keep talking about this math problem that we got in the United States when it comes down to things adding up and making sense, and a lot of shit don't. Like we gotta really process that shit, y'all. Excuse my language. We have to really process that, because everything that we've learned about slavery has been this overall encapsulation that it's us, it was our people, that's who was dealing with that. But come to find out, oh no, it's the other way around.
Actually gave sermons from the pulpit of St. Paul's Cathedral about how this is a wonderful humanitarian thing, that these kids who have been sent off for this fresh chance. Now, if that was true, why isn't it something, you'd know that at school, you'd be taught about it. But interestingly, it's something which at the time was made a big deal of, but not now. It's not on any syllabus. So there was obviously something odd about this.
Well, it's still perpetuated. You find that some history books still talk glowingly about how starving kids were sent to America and apprenticed. You can find it where it happened at Bridewell, St. Bride's Church. I believe there is a commemoration of the apprentices who were saved and sent to America. Well, we looked at the documents as You should. We looked at every document. I'm sure historians must have done, but they missed a lot, because those documents showed that these children were picked up and they were going to be, how they were going to be sold and what they were going to be priced for, and what rights they didn't have. In fact, the company gave to itself all rights over these children. It pretended to anxious parents, there were some, that no, they would be given apprenticeships, they'd get land in the end. Nonsense. Most of them were dead within a year anyway, but this is still perpetuated. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
Quite right.
But thank God there are loads and loads of documents from the 17th and 18th centuries, and amazingly, and to be blunt, to look at, to see, well, why hasn't that appeared? Why hasn't that been used? And you can test, as a journalist should, assumptions against these documents, and you can find that many assumptions are wrong. So perhaps some of ours are, but
now, what he just say, people assume, and many assumptions are wrong. People assume history all the time, and their asses are wrong, bro. Wrong, misleading people, intentionally leaving things out. Like, listen to them. We don't have to keep saying it. People have been saying it. It's just about what you want to truly hear, what you truly want to understand. Because when we look at that 1619 story, it's a flawed story. Slavery began with 20 people being delivered in the States, 20 and odd Negroes. So that's how slavery began. So it just began with those 20 people. Like, stop. Just stop.
But certainly a lot of the general historians' assumptions are bloody wrong.
And that was really our starting point, was to see why these assumptions had grown up, and why it was that what we were seeing in the contemporary documentation seemed to show a completely, if you like, a parallel universe. There's the official story, and there's the unofficial or perhaps true story. And we see huge parallels today in so many things. And it shows that spin was alive and well in the 17th century, just like it is now. You have the official story about what's happening, and then you have the hidden or covert story about what is really going on. And that's what we find that we were actually going after here.
Let me quote you from that great man, Thomas Jefferson. He was worried about the idea that lots of convicts had been sent to America, and God forbid, some Americans had been descended from convicts. He wrote this: "The malefactors sent to America were not sufficient in number to merit enumeration as one class. I do not think that the whole number sent would amount to 2,000, and being principally men eaten up with disease, they married seldom and propagated little. I do not suppose that themselves and their descendants are at present 4,000, which is little more than 1,000th part of the whole inhabitants. At that time, 1,000 convicts a year were being sent to America. According to unimpeachable sources, if you can believe convict traders, in Maryland alone, 600 a year had been going for 60 years. Tens of thousands of convicts have been flooding America, but does America want to know? No, it doesn't, and hasn't ever since. You've got all kinds of self-delusions. I mean, you've got ideas about why America was so preoccupied in preventing the truth from coming out.
Well, I think that because of being an emergent nation, it was necessary to have a kind of creation myth, really. And I think that they were able to create one, really. I think that there's a very different thing if you look at what happened in Australia, whereas Australia and New South Wales in Botany Bay was set up as deliberately, they were designated penal colonies. And so anybody who went there, actually, and who's descended from it, they know they're descended from convicts. And actually in Australia, it's worn as a kind of badge of honor, because actually quite a lot of these convicts were, of course, just petty thieves and so on, and horse thieves and general ne'er-do-wells and riffraff.
And political dissidents.
But that's the point, exactly, because quite a lot of them were political dissidents. And so, of course, particularly, Irish nationalists and so on, who were rounded up and sent there in large numbers. And of course, for them, the fact that they'd been transported for their political views, of course, was like a badge of honor. But in America, it was much more amorphous. This is a much more heterogeneous thing, and it happened in a totally different way. That none of these new plantations, even though they were all about making money, It wasn't about getting rid of undesirables, although that was a large part of it. It was a money-making machine. And so what one had to do was to actually organize it. And there were so many different groups of people, of political dissidents, religious dissidents, political refugees, and all sorts of people, and people who went of their own free will and then find themselves caught up basically in labor camps and so on, that it was so much more amorphous. And out of it was born an idea of freedom, even at the time when the vast majority of workers, of the workforce in America, were actually used as a slave labor force. But yet Americans themselves, that as it went on, they wanted to create a sense of this being separate from and different from the yoke of Britain, the English colonial system. And so a whole new view was plastered over the top of what was going on in a way in which it couldn't have been done in Australia.
He said a whole new view was plastered over what was really going on. Look, man. And that makes the perfect sense, though. Like, yep, exactly, Bass. Saying you on it, and that's the whole thing, and that's what they're saying right here. Like, it's so sad what they've done. Like, this is sad. Yeah. All right, let's just keep. Yeah. Woo. And it's coming out their own mouth. So now what?
One of the keys, one of the problems from our point of view, of course, was how do you understand the relationship between black slavery and white slavery? And we're still grappling with that. You have to read the book to see how. But one begat the other. Some black historians now agree that the basis, the structures of black slavery, enslavement, were built first around whites. In fact, white and black for decade after decade lived and worked and died and struggled and ran away together. This is something which could not be.
Look. Look. Do y'all hear this? This man right here is cooking. This the one that really want to tell the truth right here. I'm sorry, y'all. Because stop this madness. This is madness what they did. Ooh. I don't mean to laugh, y'all. Sometimes you gotta laugh to keep from crying. Like, we gotta go back. Hold on. Y'all. Woo.
But one begat the other. Some black historians
and that's the problem with history. And he made it a point to say that they always make it seem like one begots the other. Like black slavery was just black slavery is just what was going on. And that, if it was white slavery, it's indentured servitude. It's all of that shit. You know what I mean? It's not, being looked at as if they were actual quote slaves. They're trying to, sprinkle it with indentured servitude or, sprinkle it like it's something else. But when it was in fact the goddamn same thing. And that's why I felt like that a lot of those debates on those certain topics, without really understanding the context of this quote white slavery situation, like to even debate that there's a difference between the two is what's sickening about this country. I mean, about people now and our mindsets and us not really looking into things properly. Like, it's you can whitewash history, you can change everything. We all just were born pretty much. You can make pictures that were black white. You can make people who were black lighter than what they were. You can make it look like certain people were slaves and others weren't. You can make it look like that. Bro, these people is cooking. I'm surprised that nobody else been show this. Hey, OTK, I called you back too, fam. Hey, St. Louis, Big Dog Philly OG, of course, Copper Goddess. But hold on, we're going to go back to what he said, y'all, because this is extreme. And I was listening to this interview last night, And I was listening to it early this morning, and I had to just, y'all know how I do. I try to discern what I'm going to show y'all, because I want y'all, to make sure that y'all understand it, and that, we all learning from this. You know what I'm saying? And we're all understanding what really happened. And this shit is crazy. Hold up. Because for real, y'all. All right, let's go. Shout out to everybody watching. Grand Rising to y'all. It's 11:28 in DC. I'm not sure, the weather and everything, but I know it was some snow flurries this morning. Yeah. I hope y'all have some good weather, or it's not too cold where you guys are. And, I hope you guys stay warm too. Drink some hot cocoa or something. If you at work, do your thug dizzle. Don't hurt them too bad. Get your job done, roll on out. Don't let them upset you. That's to everybody. I hope you guys are living in peace and harmony the best that you can and the best that you know how. And you know what I'm saying? Taking every day a step at a time. We not perfect out here. We got to keep pushing for perfection and for greatness. And wherever you are, whatever stage you are in your life, don't fret. It will improve as long as you're working to improve it. Don't be envious of other people. Don't be envious of where other people are in comparison to you, because what's meant for you will always be for you. And slow and steady always wins the race. Y'all remember that. You take your time, do your due diligence in everything that you do, and you put your best foot forward, and you never give up. Period. My bad. Somebody must have needed that.
Now agree that the basis, the structures of black slavery, enslavement, were built first around whites. In fact, white and black for decade after decade lived and worked and died and struggled and ran away together. This is something
Hold up, guys. One more time.
Political distance on in a way in which it couldn't have been
decade after decade.
Idea of freedom, even at the time when the vast majority of workers of the workforce in America were actually
ran away, and we're still grappling with that. You have to read
political refugees and all sorts of people, and people who went of their own free will and then find themselves caught up in basically in labor camps and so on, that it was so much more amorphous. And out of it was born an idea of freedom, even at the time when the vast majority of workers of the workforce in America were actually used as a slave labor force. But yet Americans themselves, that as it went on, they wanted to create a sense of this being separate from and different from the yoke of Britain, the English colonial system. And so a whole new view was plastered over the top of what was going on in a way in which it couldn't have been done in Australia.
One of the keys, one of the problems from our point of view, of course, was how do you understand the relationship between black slavery and white slavery? And we're still grappling with that. You have to read the book to see how. But one begat the other. Some black historians now agree that the basis, the structures of black slavery, enslavement, were built first around whites. In fact,
so black slavery, the story of black slavery, it's built on what? What happened with who? Not our shit, but theirs, right?
White and black for decade after decade lived and worked and died and struggled and ran away together.
Blacks and whites lived, died, worked, struggled, and ran away together. Do you hear? Bro, listen, I don't got time.
This is something which could not be afforded by the plantation class, by the big planters. And after a big rebellion in the 1670s, they, I think, a deliberate policy of divide and rule developed. And thereafter, white servants were told that they weren't really the same as black servants. Blacks were slaves, and whites were servants. In fact, the black position was worsened considerably, horribly. The white position wasn't worsened, but it was supposedly improved, but it was only marginally. They were still chattels, they were still used, and this was, and they could still be bought and sold. You can see it in wills, do
you? I hope y'all hear him. Like, you could still be bought and sold. They were told that their condition wasn't the same as these quote these blacks.
Will the planter's possessions to his sons, etc., and they may include 10 Negro slaves, 10 white servants, etc., along with the horses and the chattel.
Shawson, you always coming in the middle of my videos. I mean, in the middle of my live stream talking trash. Good morning, first of all, and peace, not a coincidence. And yeah, secondly, Shawson, don't come in here starting, okay? Because I already read a couple of things. You might need to go and rewind it about white slavery in America. And these two gentlemen are investigative people who've investigated this topic. This is actually very old. This is actually from 11 years ago. It might be older than that. But don't come in here starting. Good morning, everyone. Peace. Damn. What's up with the family? Hey, y'all. Y'all pulled up. Hold up. Hey, St. Louis. Hey, Cosmin Cow. Of course, that's my bro right there. Cosmin Cow, man, beat you down. Period, okay? Hey, Jaja. Hey, So-So. Hey, Boo. What's up, Texas? How you been, man? Yeah, shout out to y'all. Thank you so much, family. All right, let's roll. Let's keep it moving. Maybe he need to go back and hear what a man said, that they act like black slavery begatted white slavery or something. Maybe we need to go right back there for 1 second. I think that let's go right back there. Hi, Dulcie. Hey, beautiful.
Built first around whites. In fact, white and black for decade after decade. One of the keys.
I gotta get this together.
Historians now agree that the basis, the structures of black slavery, enslavement, were built first around whites. In fact, white and black for decade after decade lived and worked and died and struggled and ran away together. This is something which could not be afforded by the plantation class, by the big planters. And after a big rebellion in the 1670s, they, I think, a deliberate policy of divide and rule developed. And thereafter, white servants were told that they weren't really the same as black servants. Blacks were slaves and whites were servants. In fact, the black position was worsened considerably, horribly. The white position wasn't worsened, but it was supposedly improved, but it was only marginally. They were still chattels, they were still used, and this was, and they could still be bought and sold. You can see it in wills, which will the planter's possessions to his sons, etc., and they may include 10 Negro slaves, 10 white servants, etc., along with the horses and the chattels, etc. This went on all the way through the British colonial period. It ended with the War of Independence, and a couple of days into the War of Independence, there was an advert in the Virginia Gazette, and we found this by trawling through the Virginia Gazette. It was an advert, well, many adverts for Runaways. This is one of the great insights into black slavery, black enslavement, the number of runaway notices saying his name is whatever, he looks like this, he's got marks of whipping on his back, there's £5 reward if you return to the master, etc. Well, many of these went out for white servants as well. On this day in April 1770.
Many of these went out for white servants as well. Like, listen, we got to understand. Woo, they really threw the story of slavery on us. Like, it was just, it makes sense though. It makes sense though. Why they would want to cover this up.
Ended in with the War of Independence, and a couple of days into the War of Independence, there was an advert in the Virginia Gazette. And we found this by trawling through the Virginia Gazette. It was an advert, well, many adverts for Runaways. This is one of the great insights into black slavery, black enslavement, the number of runaway notices saying his name is whatever, he looks like this, he's got marks of whipping on his back, please, there's £5 reward if you return to the master, etc. Well, many of these went out for white servants as well. On this day in April 77, I'm not quite sure which it was, 1775, which was a couple of days after the first fighting began, which launched the American War of Independence. 10 ads appeared in the Virginia Gazette for runaways. 2 were for black runaways, 8 were for white runaways. 2 of those notices for white, right?
2 were for. Stop. This one wanted to tell the truth. For real, he been trying to get this out. You can tell the way he talking. 2 were black, 8 were quote white. 2 are quote black, 8 are white. Stop it.
White runaways were put in by a planter called George Washington. And he was still looking for them after the war.
Amazing, yeah.
The one great thing about investigating history, which marks it out from investigating contemporary events, is that you don't have to worry about libel.
But I'm supposed to explain, I mean, one thing that we haven't said, for those of you who don't know, the basis of how the early American successful colonies worked was it was through the Virginia Company, which was one of these brand new things called a joint stock company. And this was the creation of modern capitalism, modern mercantile capitalism as we know it today. And up until then, up until this period, basically merchants basically worked independently or in loose ad hoc collections of people to fund great enterprises and so on. And the idea was of actually coming together in a more formal way and creating these joint stock companies. And the Virginia Company was just one of these new joint stock companies, and they were given the right to people a part of this of the new world, and to do so they had various big problems. One, of course, was distance, because it was 3,000 miles away. Another one was that in Elizabethan times they had hoped and had been told that they would find untold wealth in the form of gold and silver, like the Spanish and Portuguese had done further south. And initially they hoped that they would get rich quick on this fantastic scheme of just going there and basically finding gold. And all sorts of totally erroneous reports were brought back by various early adventurers about great quantities of gold. And they had this vision of El Dorado in the north. Now, very quickly, when one barrel supposedly of gold was brought back during the days of Walter Raleigh, and when it was actually analysed and assayed, of course, it was fool's gold. That dreadful thing that we all know from cowboy westerns and so on, and gold rush movies and so on. We all know that. And this had happened.
Bro. Hold up. Let me let him finish it. Then I'm gonna comment on what he's saying, because I kind of want to go back. I want my man to come back in there, because he was cooking. Like I feel like he more so stayed on key more than my man right here. But they both did good. Don't get me wrong, y'all. Because I think one of the biggest takeaways that I took from this was the fact that a lot of things that we have learned was not the truth, bro. Like, these folks was indeed, they were slaves, bruh. And history likes to paint it out to make them out to be, oh, indentured servitude. Oh, they got let go. No, they were being sold on the auction block. Period.
And so they realized that if they were going to make this work, it was going to have to be through finding cash crops that would work, and that they'd have to really run plantations. And to do that, to make it work, they needed a huge supply of labor, and they needed it preferably to be cheap labor, or even better, free labor. And so that was how basically the idea of getting people to come, either of rounding up people out of the jails and prisons and so on, or sweeping kids off the street, or also, of course, that the great social benefit was that if you would get rid of all the vagabonds and various sort of lowlife that people didn't like. And of course, vagabonds were not just people without a trade, because a vagabond in the late 1500s, early 1600s, was classed as anybody who was like, if you were a traveling minstrel, you were classed as a vagabond. So Shakespeare, in fact, would have been a vagabond at one time, because he was a member of a group of traveling players. Fortunately, he had very rich allies and patrons, and in fact, the interesting thing was that Shakespeare became an investor in the Virginia Company, along with his famous patron, the Earl of Southampton. So they needed this cheap labor force, and the question was how to get it. And they dressed up these ideas of rounding up basically vagrants, petty criminals, and then, of course, all sorts of dissidents and so on. And they would all be shipped off under the pretense that basically they were the ones who were not criminals and who were not criminalized in this system of rounding up vagrants and homeless children and so on. They used a very interesting technique to actually to persuade people to go there. They painted a rosy picture of this great new world. And they were aided and abetted in this by a wonderful thing, because at that time, of course, there was a huge upsurge in religious dissent. And all sorts of new religious groups grew up, names that we know today, like the Quakers and the Puritans and the Plymouth Brethren and so on. And there was this great millennialism, this idea of finding the new world, and so lots of people wanted to go to find a new world. If only you could cleanse yourself of the horrors and the tainted world that they find themselves in today. And so, of course, they were ripe for the plucking. And the idea was that if they had no money, many of them, and so all they were doing was going to work their passage off over a period of years. But of course, this system was totally abused, and it was totally abused in a very particular way, which maybe you might like to talk about, called the Headright system, which is how human beings became commoditized. They were turned into commodities, like chattels, like something that could be bought and sold, like a hog or a cow or a goat or anything else. And they became worth a particular amount of money. And this was simply because, and how they turned in from people who were just going to search a new life for themselves, became commodities. And maybe you'd like to talk about that, Mike.
Well, Headrights was introduced in 1619 to encourage settlement. And the idea was the payment of 50 acres of land in Virginia for every soul brought into Virginia, every soul brought in by someone else, or every soul who paid for their own passage. And so people after with money could invest in people. They could pay for half a dozen poor to go to America. They would sign them up as indentured servants, and if it was half a dozen, they'd get half a dozen 50 acres, several hundred acres. Some brought vast numbers of people, 60, 70, hundreds. I can't remember how, but there was certainly something like 80 groups or 80 individuals who brought in more than 100 people each during a couple of years. And they got vast amounts of land. They also got the labor of these people who signed up to get there. They had the labor of these people for a number of years. It varied between 3 and 11 years. But if the system developed that these people who were claimed to be the riches of Virginia, planters would say later on, our riches are our servants. They were indeed. They would get these people, they would make money on them by getting more and more acres, which they could sell. The servants themselves, if they disobeyed, if they ran away, their period of servitude would be doubled. Sometimes it would certainly go up. It could go up for every month away. They could serve 10 extra months. So if you're away for a few months, you could serve years and years and years. And most of these people never survived that long anyway. Half of them died within a year. They, as Don said, they became a trade developed. It became very, very profitable to deal in men. And there were all kinds of, and women, all kinds of children, all kinds of agents were doing this. And in fact, this so needful was Virginia and Maryland and the rest of America for labor that another market, a criminal market grew up, which Don can talk about.
Well, very... Well, a good sign of people realizing they're on a good thing is that as soon as a market develops, you can be sure that that criminals latch onto it, and this is something that one sees throughout history. And the interesting thing is that right at the very beginning, I mean, almost immediately, the first children were rounded up and sent out to work on the plantations in the brave new world. Almost immediately, a kidnapping industry grew up, and of course, a kidnapping industry could only grow up if there was a demand, and there was, because these new plantations, not only in America but also in the Caribbean, to service the new plantations throughout the Caribbean as well, they were a voracious demand for labor, simply because the attrition rate was horrendous. People either were worked to death because since they were only signed up for a specific number of years, anything, sort of 4, 5, 6, 7 years, or even longer in some cases. If you were a young child, if you were a boy, and some of them were only 7 or 8 years old, and you were swept up and taken away, you belonged to your new master until the age of 21. So a long time. And so the criminal underworld realized very quickly there was a market here to service this. And of course, they weren't constrained by any of the needs and desires of the official world. So they started to round up kids off the streets of the seaports of the British Isles, and they had a wonderful name. They were called spirits because they spirited people away. And the spirits, the first recorded spirit was in 1618 in the West Country. And which is very early, if you think it's right at the very beginning of this whole enterprise. And very quickly it became the first really big scale organized crime syndicates.
Organized crime. To round up the little British kids off the streets and send them to America to work. Yeah.
Really is what grew up then, which I think is something which isn't realized, that the idea of organized crime syndicates we think as being something entirely new. It isn't. It's something that existed in the early 1700s. And they were able to exist like crime syndicates do all over the world with the connivance of the authorities. And they had all sorts of people from local beadles and constables and magistrates, and all sorts of people were in cahoots with them to round people up and flog them off to go and work as slave labor in the colonies. So this is one of the fascinating things. And very quickly you see how and it became a huge cause célèbre. When you read the newspapers, the news sheets of the flyers of the 1600s, you see that it became one of these sort of like urban myths. I mean, it was a shocking thing, and there were endless reports about how, and in fact there were cases where people got so worried about being spirited away that in fact there were cases where in the West Country in England where word was get around that spirits were in the distance, and all looked.
But you know how they like to tell us in our history that they was taking our kids, they was selling them on the auction blocks, and no, it was not our kids. Okay. And I feel like I've been addressing this, like even when I had the one-on-one with Supreme Chief Holiday, like the same thing, just a bunch of gish gallop throwing things in, trying to intertwine the history, trying to connect it, but really they're trying to cover up something, an entirely bigger conspiracy, if you will. And I don't like to use the word conspiracy for real, because it just leaves note to be like, it could possibly be true and it may not be true, just based on what you believe, based on certain facts or what have you, or whatever you can really prove, right? But this is, I mean, I know a lot of us have already been aware of like certain things, but I think like the full scope of slavery being like majority white folks makes a lot of sense. Now, there is, hold up, before I go back, to the video, I had something else up. Hold on. I had another. Is this it? Okay. Is this the one I wanted to show? It's just like, I think the biggest misconception about slavery in itself is that it racially belongs to one group, and that it's racial in nature, just in general, right? And I think that that's just the biggest issue that we have here, is that, we find that slavery has happened so much throughout the world, and they've, in this country, managed to, what's the word, make this a bigger thing than what it really is. Like, they've put it really on a larger scale. Like, this is of a bigger magnitude now, because it's coming down to us grappling with who we are, our identity, based off a story that we were told without any viable proof, especially when it comes down to how many eyewitness accounts that we have about the millions that were snatched out of Africa. Like, we have to really sit back and really think about how much of that is true when we're talking about the 1619 story and these 20 and odd Negroes. Like, that's the start of that's our start in this country. And we all know that it's not. So I want to play a little bit more of this, and then it's something else I wanted to go into too briefly, y'all. And then it's going to be a wrap for today. But it's not about listening to white people, Knack. This is white people who investigate in white slavery. So this is not necessarily like listening to white people. I think most of the sources and the things that we used most of the time in research comes from white scholars. Unfortunately, I know, like, we have a lot of Black scholars out there, but a lot of our Black scholars have been tainted by Pan-African ideology. So it keeps them away from our ethnographic connection to the Americas. And it keeps them jaded, because we're talking about social engineering, and we're talking about genocide and all of these different things that were going on during that, those early periods in history that has affected our story, affected who we are. A lot of people haven't learned that, white slavery is real, and not even in the context of just it being, quote, indentured servitude, but in fact that it is something that encapsulates the whole slave trade narrative to begin with, and what they've done to put us at the forcenter of a story that really ain't about us. So yeah, like, I'm not saying that, like he said Black people and white people ran away together. So it's like, you can't just say that we are being like this was based on just us and our people, when no, there's a whole nother side to it that hasn't been taught. And when you look at the holes in the story, like I said, that's the biggest issue here. And we have every right to question it. Every right. So, it's not even about listening to a white person, but if people are going to investigate it, let them. And then not only that, we have a hard time listening to a lot of Black scholars, because a lot of times if we're listening to Black scholars, then it's like, oh, they're biased about what happened, blah, blah, blah. Depending on how they look at it, they may not want to believe that this was something that was not really a prominent thing amongst our people, like they try to make it seem, when everybody was out there, if that's the case. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like to each his own. I mean, I know, but like to each his own in that regard. Like, like the man said it. One doesn't beget the other. He said it. They already said it. So I know there's one more thing I want to show, but hold on, because I want them to keep cooking for a second.
all the young women or men of the village or town, women, they would actually run away.
They hid in the forest or the...
Yeah.
There was a parallel with paedophilia, with the fear of paedophilia.
Yeah. Except this was in a huge level, and of course went on for a long time. And then, of course, laws were quickly passed against all of this. And the kind of people who were preyed upon were the gullible, the weak, the young. So it was young children right through into men and women in their early mid-20s, really, and these people were either just shanghaied, like you think of straightforward violent kidnapping, or they could be inveigled on board ships. Come and see around my ship. The next thing they know is the ship has taken sail and they're on it. And that happened a great deal. And in fact, stories like that were the basis for a great deal of stories that you get in literature. If you look at Robert Louis Stevenson's famous book, Kidnapped, the story about how Davy Balfour, the hero of Kidnap, is inveigled on board this bark at anchor just to come and see around it, and the way this young boy is. And the next thing he knows is the ship sets sail and they're bound for Carolina. And that was, and like so many things that writers use, of course, this is based on absolute fact. And there were so many cases of this happening to people, and people were, they were, plied with alcohol, spirited away. They were knocked over the head. They were persuaded that they were signing up for, for a great world where they'd be given land and all the rest. And of course, I'm just duped into this. And sometimes it was much more violent.
They used to get, I think, a man who ran the biggest gang of conspirators in London worked from St. Paul's, and he got, I think it was 40 shillings per head from the American agent for everyone he picked up. And his followers would gather around him in St. Paul's, and they'd be told that what we need today is a 6'2" fellow who knows about farming. So they'd go and look, etc., bring it back, get 40 shillings. And apparently this guy allegedly handled about 700 or 800 a year, according to another estimate by, which we don't believe, nobody believes, but it must show something. And this was by an anti-slaver, a cleric. He reckoned that in 1680, the numbers being spirited away were 10,000 a year. I can't believe that, but I'm sure that it was a huge number. Nobody can know, of course, how many were spirited away. How can you bloody well tell?
No crime statistics in the 17th century.
One of the great things about the Virginia Company being a company for us investigative journalists is that, of course, it kept minutes. It kept voluminous records, and in those records, and it still escapes me how many historians haven't read them, you've got the details of the fiddles, of the governors who were selling people on their own account, the governors in Virginia. You've got details of how a man who was running the Virginia Company, a man who was still hailed as a great defender of democracy, because he took on James I, and he also introduced an assembly in Virginia. This man is called Edwin Sandys, is lauded, but it was Edwin Sandys behind the capture and sale of children. It was Edwin Sandys who, when James I wanted 100 youths who he didn't like, who had been making a nuisance of themselves around one of his palaces, when he wanted them deported and forced the Virginia Company to do so, it was Edwin Sandys who said, I'll take some of them on my plantation. You get this from the minutes. You get amazing stuff about people who historians say are terrific, and they're not.
And one of the fascinating things about that is to see why, when we just said, that this actually became a systematized and actually part of how the colonies were actually peopled and how labor was collected, was that, just like Mike quoted sources on the American side, in England you see all sorts of memoirs and private letters and so on, and you learn that, for example, by 1647, 1649, a man called William Bullock, who had settled in Virginia and also in Barbados, he wrote a book about the new colony of Virginia and what it was like. And he actually said in the book that actually the normal way of getting labor was actually you went to the spirits. And then we read also letters from a plantation owner later on in the 1660s in Barbados. He comes to England to buy servants from the spirits, And he laments the fact that, in fact, there's somebody else, the fact that the market has dried up temporarily, and he's incredibly miffed. And so you see actually that there is a pattern here, and that it's an accepted way of actually buying your labor force, and that the criminality became, and we also know that it was sanctioned officially. How do we know that? Well, we know that because there were various laws passed about kidnapping, specifically to outlaw kidnapping people for the new colonies. And the first one was passed in 1645. It made no difference. Various interdiction laws were taken that all ships that were leaving for the colonies had to be searched to see were there any children on board who were not there of their own free will or without a letter of permission from their parents or guardians. This, of course, was not enforced. It was for a little bit in Bristol, which was the only port that took it seriously. And then again in 1670, another law was passed that actually said that kidnapping children to send them to new colonies was a capital offence, punishable by hanging. And we can see how effective that was, simply because you see what actually happened when spirits came up before the courts, when they actually came to trial. One great example in the mid 1600s was two kidnappers, husband and wife, came up before the court in London for kidnapping and sending off, without her parents' permission, a 16-year-old girl. So it's been a capital offence for 12 years at this stage. This is 1682, I think it is. And so what great penalty is meted out to them? They were fined 14 pence. They would have got anything up to £20, by the way, for selling that girl, by the way, and they were fined 14 pence. So what you see is the courts not meting out the penalties, and the whole thing actually being part of a whole system throughout the society at that time.
Oddly, it's one of the villains of history is a hero in this. One of the great villains of history is Judge Jeffreys, the bloody assize, the man who executed hundreds after the rebellion against James II by the Duke of Monmouth. The bloody assize swept through the West Country. As he was sweeping through the West Country, he heard, Judge Jeffreys, that the mayor of Bristol and the rest of the magistrates there were in cahoots with the spiriters, and they were conning people into pleading guilty to crimes which would get them transported. And if they didn't plead guilty, said the local judges to these malefactors, you're going to hang. And of course, they all pleaded guilty. They were sent off there and they were sold, and the locals made a lot of money. Judge Jeffreys heard about this. He was outraged. Amazingly, he brought the mayor into court and said he was going to have him. He was going to do terrible things to him. He began by fining him £1,000, which is a hell of a lot of money then. But then he was going to do much more. Alas, Judge Jeffreys fell, and James II fell. That's a Catholic, I say. Alas, fell a few months later, and
I just love how they breaking this down. I love how they breaking this down, because we got to understand this, bro. We got to. Hold up, y'all, because it's something I wanted to. Let me look. Do I have it right here on cue? Okay, let me see if I have the right record. Hold on. Is that the right one? No. Damn it. All right. Real quick, let's just take a step back. Let me shout out to Cosmo. Okay, 1 second, family.
Shout out to the mama chief. Yeah, you be quiet when Big Mama speak. What she gave us is a part of me. It flows through my arteries. Even on that journey, that love grows how the garden be. The first to teach us when we sick, the first to heal us. Mama's boy, yeah, you know, her pride and joy. Soul food, yeah, you know, I'm an enjoy. Calm you down just by the sound of a voice. There isn't another feeling inside when they cheering you on at your game and you feeling the pride. You and your siblings fighting, she gon' make you put them feelings aside. She can't lead you down the road, but she can give you the guide. Where you think I get that blissful look in my eyes? I need a side of ice cream with Bimars apple pie. You know for sure for Mama Chief, you know I'ma ride. Cause we all need our Mama Chiefs. Yeah, we all love our Mama Chiefs. The greatness, the patience, the foundation, the knowledge passed down so many generations, our motivation. I just wanna thank you for my creation. Cause we all love our Mama Chiefs. Yeah, we all need our Mama Chiefs. Yeah, we all ride for Mama Chief. The dedication, I seen your tears at my graduation. Now look, ma, your boy that made it. You the reason I'm one of the greatest. Yeah, cause we all need our Mama Chiefs. Yeah, we all love our Mama Chiefs. Yeah, we all ride for Mama Chief. Now be quiet, let Big Mama speak.
All right, y'all. Peace and love to all the Aboriginal, Indigenous, Indians. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Hey, y'all. Thank y'all for rocking with me. I'm not gonna be too much longer. I just kind of wanted to show a little bit of this, and then I'll go back to those two YT brothers that was cooking. But real quick, I just want to talk about this for a second. It's certain things that I want to hear. You know, some things obviously, like this came out in like 2011, and we already know how, you know, how history does. But I mean, I thought that this was interesting as well. Hold up.
Of associations by Quaker State. And then when this and one person published a news page that was put in the Declaration of Independence years and years before. So as I've said, after the Civil War, he's one of the most famous reformers in the early 19th century, well before Frederick Douglass, well before Martin Luther King tried to put this idea of a Black American freedom dream on the nation's radar. So what I want to talk about today for a little bit is this notion of a Black founding generation, why it's important, how we might define it, and why the Black founding generation sets up a foundation for subsequent activists to do their thing. We're going to have a little lecture, then we'll talk about the documents that you all read for today's class, then we'll come back to a little mini lecture, and we'll wrap up by looking forward to the radical abolitionist movement that debuts after the Black founding generation passes. That's the group that comes on the scene in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s and revolves around people that you might be familiar with, folks like William Lloyd Garrison, Frederick Douglass, and a whole cast of characters that lead us into the Civil War. So let's talk about Black founders and African-American freedom dreams. And I guess you could say, if we're going to start with this topic, we should start with the man that we celebrated on Monday, Martin Luther King Jr., who in 1963 gave one of the most rousing speeches in civil rights history in Washington when he talked about this great dream that he had about one day everyone living equally and peacefully in American society. And a lot of scholars have pointed out that this wasn't the only time that Martin Luther King used this dream imagery. As a matter of fact, he used similar imagery in speeches in Detroit and in other places. So he wasn't just riffing off the top of his head. He was speaking about something that was very near and dear to his heart. And he was probably borrowing in some way, shape, or form from Rochester's own Frederick Douglass. So if we're talking about African-American freedom dreamers, we have to talk about Frederick Douglass, who moved here in 1847, published several abolitionist newspapers from his base in Rochester right through the Civil War until he moved to Washington, D.C. after the Civil War. He's one of the most famous reformers and orators of the 19th century. And this image is really powerful because it's from the 1840s when Douglass was young, commanding, just making his way on the abolitionist circuit. And most importantly, in this image, you get a sense of the kind of bristling manliness that accompanied Douglass wherever he went. His hands are curled here ready to strike out at people who disagree with him. Now, at this point, Douglass was a nonviolent activist, to be sure, but he self-published this image to make clear to anyone who saw him that he was deadly serious about the African-American freedom dream. And a lot of white printers were uncomfortable with this. And as a matter of fact, a few people cropped out the images of his fists in their publications because they didn't like its suggested militancy. The picture on the side of the Douglass image comes from Mount Hope Cemetery. You know, people from around the world come to Rochester to visit Douglass's grave at Mount Hope Cemetery. And if you go there on any day, even in the winter, dedicated to? Is it a proposition beyond Douglass and Martin Luther King and people like W.E.B. Du Bois, maybe Fannie Lou Hamer, if you think about it? All these people who are sort of well known in the study of civil rights, if you want to understand the black struggle for equality or early civil rights movements. But to really get a sense of how deep the struggle went in American society, you have to begin with the starting of the American nation, that theme that we've been meditating on. What is the American nation dedicated to? Is it a proposition? Is it a nation defined by geographical borders? Is it some sort of idealistic notion? It's probably all of those things, but for African Americans in the 1770s, 1780s, and 1790s, it's a radical expression of human equality. And so the idea that a civil rights movement, an abolitionist movement aimed at slavery, would follow from American revolutionary rhetoric was something that African Americans took for granted in a way. They decided that the language that was put in the Declaration of Independence applied to their very lives, their bodies, their futures, their visions. And many people actually thought that the Declaration of Independence, the notion that everyone was created equal, transcended the American nation. At the end of his life, as you'll see, when Richard Allen, who you're reading about right now, got really upset with the intensification of American race prejudice, he flirted with several overseas immigration schemes, and one immigration scheme that would have taken African Americans to British Canada. And he said the Declaration of Independence would probably have more meaning in a place like British Canada, which had started to get rid of slavery, than in the United States, which in the 1830s, as Allen reached the end of his life, still held on to bondage with all of its might. Even though it was drained out of the North, it was growing in the South and the Southwest. And so Allen said, I'm not going to let the American nation spoil these wonderful ideas enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. I'm going to take the Declaration of Independence with me to Canada. So again, the main theme that we're going to be meditating on here is that a black civil rights movement, an abolitionist movement aimed against the institution of slavery, takes root as soon as the country takes shape. It's not something that is delayed in coming. It's right there as soon as we start talking about the Revolution, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. So if you forget everything else during this little mini lecture about black founders, think to yourself, they're there during the time of Thomas Jefferson. They're there during the time of George Washington. They're there during the time of James Madison, and they're trying to create a more perfect union.
So please understand, I'm not sure. I mean, his motherfucking ass saying African American, y'all know I don't agree with none of that. But what I really was trying to highlight was him right there when he said that we were here. We've been here. We were here during all of that. And before that too, that they like to so eloquently keep out. Like, that's why I was showing y'all that other part, about white slavery and how they've embellished this into our history, like making it seem like it was us. But how the hell was we so enslaved to the point where we were involved with the founding of the country in its entirety? Can I get some fire emojis in the chat? Do y'all understand what I'm saying? I don't know why he went through all that monologue about Martin Luther King and all of that stuff. I don't know why he went through all of that. But I think he was going through all of that to pretty much show that, hey, usually when we start talking about our history, or quote black history, or black American history, or quote African American history, or whatever they want to fucking call it, you know what I mean? It starts from these odd places, you know what I'm saying, instead of starting from the very beginning. And that's the issue. They don't talk about our involvement with the Declaration of Independence. They don't talk about a lot of things that's been done. Yeah, that's fine. We're talking about people before Frederick Douglass and others. Just period. We're not talking about the people who were involved with the founding of the country. And, the other narratives, and this is just my opinion, aren't adding up in that regard. Okay? Because I ain't about to be too much longer, y'all. But shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to everybody that came through. Please like, share, subscribe, because I'm only going to be about 20, 30 more minutes, perhaps. Because I said I wasn't trying to have y'all for too long because I didn't want to keep postponing the build that I was going to do on this. But I kind of just wanted to, I didn't agree with everything that this young man, lectured about. But it's like we have to talk about what actually occurred before that, and in what way were we instrumental in the founding of the country. So, and I think that's overlooked with the story of slavery and other things that aren't really the truth, that are dusted upon, fabricated, like his story, not our truth.
So let's talk a little bit about what they're trying to do. And you'll see here that I've got an image from a Philadelphia newspaper. Briefly alluded to this last time. This is from 1781. Pennsylvania had passed the world's first gradual abolition law in 1780. And already in 1781, conservatives in this key northern state of Pennsylvania tried to create some sort of anti-abolitionist backlash. In other words, they wanted to push the abolition law back into the hole from which it came. And African Americans were really worried about this. And one person published a newspaper article that appeared in the Philadelphia Freeman's Journal, 1781. Great quote here. This person tried to inform white legislators' dread of being deprived of that liberty which we have recently obtained. If you're going to take freedom away from us now, then we're going to have to fight back and fight for it with all of our might. And I think this becomes a keynote for the entire Black founding generation. So let's do a little Black Founders 101, see who these people were, what they stood for, why their activism still commands attention all these years later. So when we're talking about Black founders, the first reason that we can define them as founders is that they build things. They're community builders in all of these areas that are starting to see African Americans get out of slavery and attain freedom. So let's go back to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania had sanctioned slavery for several decades, and then during the Revolution, several enslaved people run away, get their freedom. The British occupy Philadelphia during the late 1770s, and so slavery really takes a hit in the city of brotherly love and in the Quaker state. And then when the state of Pennsylvania passes that gradual abolition law, it encourages people to either come to Pennsylvania to try to get their freedom or to make a free life, or it really challenges masters in ways that they didn't anticipate. As a matter of fact, even though it was a gradual abolition law that wouldn't have liberated people born after 1780 until they reached the age of 28, slaves start running away to pressure their masters to liberate them sooner. So in the 1780s and in the 1790s, you see African Americans running from a rural area of Pennsylvania to Philadelphia, and when their masters track them down, they get in this argument, and their masters say, look, what will it take for you to stop running away? And an enslaved person will say, well, I'd like my freedom. And they go through this little bargaining process. Well, I'm not going to give you your freedom now. Well, how about in, let's say, 5 to 7 or 9 years, which would be an indentured contract. And after they hash out the details, they sign a document, you've converted, as an enslaved person, bondage for life into indentured servitude. And so already by the 1790s, we have a sizable free Black population taking shape in Philadelphia. Somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 by the time of the early 1790s. And African Americans in the city of brotherly love, start to create what are known as independent or autonomous institutions to help them navigate the rough waters of freedom. These institutions would include black churches, self-help societies, insurance organizations, later on reading groups and libraries and educational societies. There are Masonic lodges, other types of associations. By the early 1800s, you have burial societies, which will help people fund the cost of burying their loved ones, which of course is very important for people of African descent. The idea that you have to send people off with a proper burial is absolutely central.
See, he be on some bullshit. He was making me mad the whole time. Like, I just wanted him to stay, like, boy, I just wanted him to stay on the stuff. Like, instead of saying all that weird shit that he be saying. But anyway, the point is to highlight all the stuff that we were doing well in the beginning, well before all of this. It's like they seem like they really only want to highlight some of it and not all of it. And that'd be my biggest problem when I'm watching these things and trying to break this down. So real quick, y'all, because then I'm going to go ahead and probably, let me see. Let me go back here for 1 second. Get back to these guys. My two brothers who was cooking.
He was never able to.
But my point is showing that was trying to show y'all that, listen, that there is proof of us being a part of the founding of the country. Like this idea that we are slaves, like, and that we didn't own white folks, and all of that is false. We own white folks, all of that. Like, yeah.
Right, this wrong.
It's like, it's no really other way to really try to explain it, because I feel like just based off everything that they've said so far, and even him, you know what I mean? Like all that other stuff he be saying, like trying to connect it to Africa gets on my damn nerves. You know what I'm saying? But when it's all said and done, it doesn't make any sense for these quote Africans to be at the forefront of history, changing the country, changing the world. Like, it doesn't make any sense that they would need to bring people all the way over here just to do that. Not from there. Now, when we're talking about people where they were really snatched from was over in the British, not the colonies, but in the British land, England and all those places like that, Germans and all of those types of people who were rounded up and gathered up and sent here long before us. Long before they made this claim that it was us. So.
And so the good Bristol Protestants went on taking weak apples away.
Was there a way in which they determined the value of convicts and slaves?
Well, it was laid down when it in 1718. The government decided it wanted to make it a bigger business, sending convicts out to America, and so it subsidized them. And it said, well, we will pay every trader so much money per head. And the money paid originally, a trader put in a very small bid, well, a very healthy bid, £3 a head. He upped it to £6 later on. He wanted to get the trade. He got it all. So he got £6 a head. Is that the price? No, because it's what he could get for it in the States. Sorry, in America. No, it wasn't laid down, but that ensured he got that £6 and he'd make a profit, whoever he took there. And they would normally sell children for £7 or £8, women for about £9, and skilled people for anything from £15 upwards. So we found in what is an amazing resource, if everybody wants to look at what was happening in the over a 200 or 300 year period, look at the website of the Old Bailey. It's amazing. It's got all the transcripts, transcript after transcript of trials. It's astonishing stuff. And in this, one of the end of our story is a plot to continue sending convicts to America. America has got independence. The English don't know what to do with their convicts because they can't send them to America anymore. So they've got 1,000 convicts a year. built them up built up a great well of convicts on ships in hulks in the Thames, and they're filthy and they're full of disease and people are breaking out of them, etc. What can we do? Says the English king and the English administration. Well, smuggle them into America. So they decide they're going to smuggle them into America. They're going to con the Americans into believing these convicts are really ordinary poor immigrants. Well, they think they can get rid of it. I mean, it goes ahead, this story. And it's in investigating this story, of course, it doesn't succeed in the end, as Chipman gets through. In investigating this, we found one guy who'd been sent, one convict, to America in this shipment. He'd been sold, and he'd by a whole series of mishaps had returned to England and was going to be hanged because it was a capital offence to come back from transportation before your time. So this guy was going to be hanged. He told his story in court, and it's in the transcripts. And he said that he was sold for £60, which was a fortune. Anyway,
what was his skill?
I don't know. He didn't tell what his skill was. He just said, "I'm sorry, I just want to come back."
Because the price not only depended on how much did it cost to actually send the person, and that remained more or less steady around about £6 or so by the time you gave somebody a few grits to eat and you kept them, looked after them, and put them on the ship and paid the passage to get them there. So that was about £6, and then you looked for your profit on top of that. And very soon the price then rose once they had crossed the Atlantic to about sort of £20 or so. And so, in fact, it's a very good question, is that the price, because the price actually then tells you an awful lot about also how there was a con in all of this. There's a widespread view that basically by people who decided to sign up as indentured servants of their own volition, and then basically worked for plantation owners or factory owners in the colonies, that this was just a straightforward financial transaction. And basically, you pay for me, I haven't got any money, you pay for me to go across the Atlantic, and then I work for you for X number of years to pay off the passage. But when you look at the economics of it, you see that this is actually not really the case at all. And we're able to work that out because of some fantastic contemporary documents. One in particular is a remarkable piece of work by a man called Richard Ligon. And Ligon was a royalist in England, and during the civil wars, he'd backed the wrong side, obviously, and he lost his lands and his money, and he decided that he'd go to Barbados and chance his luck at setting up. And because when he went there, he was very well received by all the major landowners and planters and so on, and was received at the finest houses of the greatest planters of the day, who were already making astonishing amounts of money. And Ligon did the remarkable thing. He then came back to England, and he wrote his account of this trip, a true and accurate account of the island of Barbados, as I think it's called, published in 1659. And this book is one of the world's first business self-help manuals. Today, if you go into any shop, any bookshop, and they're absolutely just stuffed in the business department of how to do it. You know, how to be a tycoon, how to become a billionaire, etc., etc., etc. Well, Ligon wrote one of the first books of this in the middle of the 1600s, and he described not only his incredible adventures about going to Barbados and coming back again, but he also described what you had to do to set up as a sugar planter, and he described in minute detail all the costs, from how much it costs to buy your farm, etc., right through to all your labor costs and everything else. And at the time he wrote, of course, conditions in Barbados were truly horrendous. If they were bad in Virginia, they were a lot worse, because there was no attempt, like in America, not only the Virginia company saw it all as a money-making exploit, that's what it was, pure and simple, but also there was a feeling about this idea of this new idea of colonies and empire, and the idea of empire was really taking a root there. But in the islands where they had the sugar farms and the sugar factories, it was basically just slave labor. What it was all about there was purely making money as fast as you could, and nobody cared about the attrition rate of the labor force or anything like that at all. So when Ligon described all of this, he went through minute detail of how much it cost, you see, to run your sugar plantation, including the costs of buying your workforce, and also because of the figures he had of the annual gross and net profit levels that he worked out from one of his conversations with these grandees, like people like James Drax, one of the richest men at that time in the world because of his sugar plantations. And he worked this out. And from that, you see that if somebody, because they wanted to start a brave new world, life in a brave new world, and for the want of £6 for their passage, because an agricultural labourer's wage at that time in Britain was about 12, 15 pounds an annum. So no way could they have that. If you're a skilled labourer, you could earn 20, 25, 30 pounds a year, depending on what you did and where you lived. So it was also very difficult for people to raise that money. So they would obviously sign up for indenture, and it was for 5 years minimum. Now, according to Ligon's amazing figures, the profit that each labourer made for their employer was, believe it or not, you paid off your £6 in 38 days. Sounds impossible, but true. Within a year, each labourer made for their master just under £58 profit per annum. So this idea that they then had to work for maybe 5, 6, 7 years or longer, of course, is preposterous. Because, of course, it wasn't just a straightforward economic contract. And, of course, these people, of course, had no way of working this out for themselves. So they were being conned here. And that's really what was happening with the indentured services. They were conned as to all these numbers of years that they had to work to pay off this passage. In fact, they paid it off incredibly quickly.
And once you were there, that was it. You couldn't get out. There's one source which is terrific. It's called Thomas Burton's Parliamentary Diary, and it covered the Cromwellian period. When the Stuarts came back to power,
family, I hope y'all enjoying the build. I see there's a lot of conversations going on in the chat. I appreciate it. Keep doing y'all thing. Let me just support the community one time, and then I'll go right back into this. We'll listen to this, and then I'll close it on out.
Say I'm hustling and I'm grinding. I'm making moves with my money on my mind, and I can't fall short. Always keep it thousand, slow mo. Say I'm hustling and I'm grinding. I'm making moves with my money on my mind, and I can't fall short. Always keep it thousand, slow mo.
Yes, peace and love to all the Aboriginal, Indigenous, Indians. Shout out to y'all.
they tried to get rid of all the records of the Cromwellian period, all the parliamentary records, but Thomas Burton's diary survives, and it's somewhere in the British Library. And it describes how in 1653, a group of 70 or 80 cavaliers, suspected cavaliers, were shipped out and sold in Barbados. And they were probably, some of them were certainly innocent. They weren't involved in an uprising, but the local Roundheads wanted to get rid of them and make money, because two of Cromwell's closest aides in the House of Commons, Puritans, they organized this trade. They made money out of the trade, and two of these chaps who'd been sold, they managed to get back to England. They escaped, and they arrived in Parliament with a petition. This is at a time when England was still riven with fury over between Roundheads and Cavaliers, and you can tell from the diary how the hatred which still persisted. But even so, the Puritan MPs were outraged, some of them, at what they learned their colleagues had been doing, selling freeborn Englishmen like that, and they roared and they raved, but it was suppressed. One of the guys who took the lead in demanding action had been a signatory to the execution of Charles I. A couple of years later, and he demanded action. He demanded these cavaliers who he hated be freed. They weren't. And a couple of years later, Cromwell died, and then a couple of years after that, the Stuarts were restored. The man who demanded the freedom of these Puritan prisoners, he was executed because he'd signed the death warrant of Charles I. As for the Cavaliers, they were left in Barbados for years because a genuine sale had taken place, and their owners wouldn't let them come back to England. I don't know, just. Okay. So that's helplessness, if you like.
Are you guys ready for some questions? We can open the floor for questions. I'd be grateful if you could wait for a microphone to come to you. And we'll ask our questions of Don Jordan and Mike Wall. Go ahead. Yeah.
I've got two questions. The first relates to this legal code in operation in Jamestown in the early days, which you say would be the envy of the Taliban, and people could be executed for not going to church. As far as I know, I may be wrong, but I don't think people were being executed in England at that time for not going to church. Could you comment on that? And would you like the second question now or afterwards?
I think the first one's destroyed me, but okay. The first question: I don't believe people were being executed in England for not going to church. And Dale's Law, which is what Dale's Code, which is what you're referring to, it was indeed the most ferocious set of laws that, and a set of laws that England certainly didn't operate in England. Did I understand your question correctly?
I think so. And these people were presumably Protestants.
Yes, they all would have been Protestants indeed. I mean, you were executed as a Catholic priest, but you weren't. No non-Protestants were allowed in Virginia at the time.
Okay, second question. I'm very interested in the nature of the research that you did for this book, because I've been doing similar research over the past 3 years in relation to 2 Caribbean colonies. I haven't read the whole of the book yet, but I get the impression that the vast majority of the references in your notes are to published books, printed books, some of which were contemporary, but some of which were much later. And where you do use stuff at the National Archives at Kew, often you refer to the Calendar of State Papers, which are printed summaries written by civil servants and expurgated in some cases, rather than the original documents. And there must be a vast quantity of original documents in terms of correspondence from the colonies to the Lords of Trade and Plantations, and you don't seem, I get the impression, viewed very much of this material. No, it's true. We didn't alas, spend as much time as we would have liked at Kew. I mean, we could and would, if we'd have had the opportunity, have spent another year researching this. Alas, we couldn't. Our publisher wouldn't allow us to do that. I know our publisher also said 100,000 words. We wanted to write twice as much, because we certainly had enough material, but we didn't have enough time to, alas, it's no good excuse, but I'm afraid that's the truth. We didn't have enough time to go to sources. We wanted to run over there.
Now, do we know what happened to some of the indentured servants after they finished their period? Did any of them ever get what they thought they were going to get in the end? Are there any, I hesitate to call them success stories, but are there any stories of people who did, work it through and eventually get a small parcel of land or something?
Oh, there were indeed. In fact, there were some notable cases of this. That, in fact, some notable families are descended from these early workers. Jimmy Carter's family, for example, and so some did. But one has to say that they are the minority. Even those who survived their indenture period, and one's looking at very severe working conditions. And even those who survived were quite often conned out of the things that were promised to them. You see, people were promised as part of the sweetener, because there was a huge advertising campaign went on in England to get people to go. and they were promised what were called freedom dues. And this could be anything from a sum of money to a plot of land to some livestock and a bag of meal or whatever to set you up as a farmer. Right? But quite often when they had finished their period, that they discovered that somehow or other the freedom dues had evaporated. Right? And also sometimes actually it was even worse than that, because if you take Barbados, for example, people were promised, of course, that they could get their plot of land in Barbados. The only thing is that by the mid-1600s, the large plantation owners had bought up every last single scrap of land that you could plant anything on in Barbados. So when the worker finally got their freedom, they were forced they had two options. One, if they had any money, which they usually didn't, of course, they could pay for a passage to another island and try to start again somewhere else, or they would have to sell their labor back to the very people who they'd been working for as free slave labor for all those years. And of course, because of the nature of the control of the labor market, of course, at a hugely reduced and depressed price, of course. So in fact, even for those
Unfortunately, family, I gotta hit it. I hope you all enjoyed what I was trying to convey today. I want to do a part 2 to this, and I want to pull out more documentation that I have on white slavery and more on the Negro slave owners as well. I just don't have time like I would like to get into it because I have to really get somewhere. So listen, guys, y'all stay up. I'll probably come back with a part 2 either tonight or tomorrow. I'm sorry I gotta just like abruptly stop like this, but I really have to go. So listen, y'all stay safe. I'm gonna play OTK and y'all be good out here, okay? I'm sorry. We'll catch back up another time with this.
What it look like, man? Real, man. I feel the same way you feel about word. I just don't want to rush, man. I just want to take it one day at a time. That way we can reach the highest point of friendship. I ain't then whether you know how far to take this flight. Like just jump in the plane and fly and don't know where you're going first. Just chill, baby. I got you.
We don't have to run, baby. We can chill. Just keep patient before we take it there. See, you don't really know me, and I don't really know you. Never lived a good life. Come on, let me show you. We don't have to run, baby. We can chill. Let's just keep patient before we take it there. See, you don't really know me, and I don't really know you. Never lived a good life. Come on, let me show you.
See, you don't have to rush. Baby girl, be patient. Anticipation of love making. Got your legs shaking. See, every time I'm next to you, I feel your heart beat faster. But yet you try to hide behind your smile and your laughter. See, money's what I'm after, so all I do is chill. I'm out here on the grind. I'm trying to see a meal. You never seen this good life? Well, come on, let me show you. You never had a real hug? Well, come on, let me hold you. This life I lead is troublesome. You win some, you lose some. You lost one, then gain one. You want some, come get some. See, everything you want, you need, I got you. Even though you don't know me, I don't know you, baby, I got you. That's just how it's supposed to be. Rather have you next to me, never in front or back of me. You look good beside me, so we take it there. It's some things you need to know. We don't have to rush, baby, we can take it slow.
We don't have to run, baby, we can chill. Just keep patient before we take it there. See, you don't really know me, and I don't really know you. Never lived a good life. Come on, let me show you. We don't have to run, baby, we can chill. Let's just keep patient before we take it there. See, you don't really know me, and I don't really know you. Never lived a good life. Come on, let me show you.
Say if you like me, it's what you want. I ain't about games, I'm trying to front. See something that you want, then get it. Ice cream man always deliver, never late. I come on time. Tell me, girl, what's your room size? Sitting here, watch you visualize. I can't lie, see it in your eyes. Fantasize, I need you all day, all night. Let me strap your seatbelt on before we take this flight. You know I'm helicopter high. Baby, you know I'm on a wide, baby, we can vibe. and that's just how it is. El Blizzo keep it realer than all the rest is. And don't compare me to them other dudes. I act a fool, with my tool, lock it down, just for you. You got a man, you can keep him too. I don't want him, I want you. Got a couple friends, but I got a couple too. Just let me know, girl, what you wanna do. And we can keep it on the low, long as you know, baby, just take it.
We don't have to run, baby, we can chill. Just be patient before we take it there. See, you don't really know me, and I don't really know you. Never lived a good life, come on, let me show you. We don't have to run, baby, we can chill. Let's just be patient before we take it there. See, you don't really know me, and I don't really know you. Never lived a good life, come on, let me show you.
Hold up. And before I go, so it says here, Robert M. Grooms in the Johnson family, quote, African-American owners of white and black slaves, has revealed the fact that blacks owned white slaves in America. He also notes that a legal precedent for lifelong slavery in America was established by a black slave owner with regard to one of his black slaves. So I'll just leave that right there. So now, don't worry, that heat coming. So overstand, Mo. it's not giving white folks is owning us all like they said. Okay, black folks definitely own white people too as slaves. So anyway, on that note, guys, y'all have a great day. Peace and love. Hey, Enox. Hey, Brother Wolf. I'm sorry y'all got in late. I hope y'all get on replay, gang. But I really got to go. So y'all be good. Take care, okay? OTK, call me back, man. Peace.